The slap echoed through the banquet hall before the applause died. Crystal glasses trembled. Conversation stopped. Every camera turned toward me. "You ungrateful disgrace," my eldest uncle roared, his hand still raised. "Do you know what you're refusing?" The thick envelope lay on the polished mahogany table between us. The Hartwell Family Trust. Nearly $12 billion in assets. Half the city's business elite had gathered to witness today's inheritance ceremony, expecting another carefully staged celebration of the Hartwell dynasty. Instead, they watched the eldest grandson refuse everything. I wiped the blood from the corner of my mouth and looked at the signatures waiting for me. No, my voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. "I won't accept a single share." A gasp swept through the room. Across the table, my grandmother's fingers tightened around her cane. "You've lost your mind." "No," I answered quietly. "I finally found it." My younger cousin Ethan laughed loudly enough for everyone to hear. "He's bluffing. He wants more." Several relatives nodded. That explanation fit the version of me they had built over 29 years. The obedient grandson. The reliable fixer. Whenever one cousin crashed a luxury car, I paid. Whenever an uncle lost millions in another reckless investment, I repaired the damage. Whenever another scandal threatened the family reputation, I disappeared into meetings while everyone else smiled for photographs. Not once had I complained, because every sacrifice came with the same promise. Family comes first. Today I realized those words had only applied to me. Grandmother slowly stood. Her sharp eyes never left mine. "If you refuse this inheritance, you also surrender every privilege attached to the Hartwell name. I know. You'll never enter Hartwell Holdings again. I understand. You'll receive nothing." I wasn't asking for anything. Silence. An uncomfortable silence. They expected bargaining. Tears. Anger. Anything except peace. Grandmother narrowed her eyes. "Why?" For several seconds, I simply looked around the room. The gold chandeliers. The expensive smiles. The familiar faces. Some looked confused. Others amused. A few. Afraid. Not because I refused the money. Because they had counted on me accepting it. I've spent years believing loyalty could fix betrayal. I pushed the inheritance folder back across the table. I was wrong. My father slammed his fist onto the table. "What betrayal?" His voice shook with outrage. "You've been treated better than anyone." I almost smiled. Better? When I worked 18-hour days while Ethan vacationed across Europe. When every failed executive decision somehow became my responsibility. When I signed documents nobody else bothered reading. Better. Interesting choice. I won't argue. I stepped backward. "I'm simply leaving." "You don't walk away from family." Uncle Victor shouted. I just did. I turned. The massive door stood open. Outside, rain poured over the marble steps. Someone grabbed my arm. It was my younger sister, Claire. Unlike everyone else, tears filled her eyes. "Please." Her voice barely escaped. "Don't go like this." For the first time all afternoon, my resolve faltered. Claire had never treated me cruelly. She was the only reason I stayed as long as I had. I gently removed her hand. "I'm not leaving you." She looked confused. "I'm leaving this." Behind us, Ethan laughed again. "Good." He raised a champagne glass. One less person trying to control the family. Control? I had spent years preventing disasters nobody even noticed. As I reached the entrance, a familiar voice called after me. "Adrian." I stopped. Not because of authority, because it belonged to Samuel Brooks, the Hartwell family's legal advisor for over 30 years. He rarely spoke without reason. He walked toward me carrying a sealed leather folder. His face revealed nothing. "You forgot these. I don't own anything here. They aren't from the family." He quietly pressed the folder into my hand. "They belong to your mother." My heartbeat stopped. "My mother?" Samuel gave the smallest nod. "She instructed me to deliver them only if you ever refused the inheritance." The world suddenly became very quiet. My mother had died 15 years ago. No one had ever mentioned another letter. Another instruction. Nothing. I looked toward my grandmother. For the briefest moment, something crossed her face. Not anger. Fear. Real fear. "Samuel," grandmother snapped. "That's enough." He didn't move. The instructions were legally binding. I looked at the worn leather folder. Untouched. Sealed. Waiting 15 years for this exact decision. My fingers tightened around it. Without another word, I walked into the ring. Behind me, the banquet exploded into arguments. Nobody followed. but I could feel dozens of eyes watching me disappear. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying my family's future. Only a folder left behind by a mother who apparently knew this day would come. The rain hid my expression as I crossed the empty parking lot. The chauffeur hurried toward me. "Young master, I'm not your young master anymore." He hesitated, then quietly handed me my backpack. Not luggage, not expensive gifts, just the backpack I had brought that morning. He lowered his voice. "Sir." I looked at him. "I've worked for this family 22 years. He swallowed. "You're making the right decision." Before I could answer, he drove away, leaving me completely alone. I stared at the leather folder. For 15 years, someone had wanted this hidden. Why? My apartment felt strangely unfamiliar. Not because it had changed, because I had never really lived in it. Most nights I slept at Hartwell Holdings. Most weekends belonged to family emergencies. Birthdays, board meetings, damage control. Even this apartment had been purchased because it was only 15 minutes from headquarters. I placed the leather folder on the kitchen table. The wax seal bore my mother's initials. YH. My hands hesitated. For 15 years I had believed there was nothing left of her except fading photographs and half-remembered lullabies. The seal cracked with a soft snap. Inside were 3 items: a handwritten letter, a silver flash drive, a thin envelope marked "Only after you refuse them." A chill crept up my spine. I unfolded the letter first. "Adrian, if you're reading this, then you've finally chosen yourself. I'm sorry it took so long." The room seemed to shrink around me. I continued. "They will tell you I died from illness. That was only part of the truth. The illness was real. The fear surrounding it was even more real. There are documents your grandfather never wanted anyone to see. I couldn't expose them while I was alive. I hoped your father would. He didn't. I prayed you never would have to. If you've refused the inheritance, then you've already sensed something isn't right. Trust that instinct. Do not fight them. Do not save them. Walk away. Truth survives longer than loyalty built on lies. Love. Mom." My throat tightened. I read the final paragraph again. Do not save them. The words felt impossible. Saving the family had become instinct. Every crisis, every scandal, every financial hole. I'd stepped forward automatically. My phone buzzed. "Claire." I let it ring. Again. Again. Then a message arrived. "Please answer. Everything is falling apart here." I stared at the screen. Another message. "Grandmother says you stole confidential documents." I laughed once. A tired, disbelieving sound. Of course. I had been gone less than 2 hours. Already they needed a villain. The third message came from Ethan. "Hope you're enjoying being poor. Don't come crawling back." I placed the phone face down. No replies. Not this time. Instead, I inserted the silver flash drive into my laptop. Folders appeared. Board minutes. Private transfers. Offshore accounts. Executive authorization. Hundreds of files. Someone had organized everything meticulously. My pulse quickened. One spreadsheet immediately caught my eye. Phoenix Capital. That name sounded familiar. Hartwell Holdings had nearly acquired Phoenix Capital 8 years ago. The deal had mysteriously collapsed. I opened the file. Millions. No, hundreds of millions. Transferred through shell companies over 12 years. Always approved by. I froze. The authorization signature wasn't my grandfather's. It wasn't grandmother's. It wasn't Uncle Victor's. It belonged to someone who officially held no executive authority at all. Ethan. I zoomed in. Digital certificates. Matching timestamps. Verified approvals. Impossible. Ethan had barely understood corporate finance. He certainly hadn't been managing international transactions. Someone had used his identity. Or someone had hidden behind it. Another document opened automatically. A legal memo. Prepared by Samuel Brooks. Never submitted. Subject. Evidence of internal asset diversion. The memo ended abruptly. And signed. As though someone had stopped it before completion. Then another file. Audio recording. I pressed play. Static. A woman's voice. My mother's. "If anything happens to me before this reaches Adrian." My chest tightened. "Promise me you won't let him spend his life cleaning up their sins." Another voice answered. "Samuel." "I promise." The recording ended. I leaned back slowly. For years I believed my mother simply accepted the family's decisions. Instead, she had been investigating them. A sharp knock interrupted my thoughts. 3 slow knocks. Not hurried. Not aggressive. I checked the peephole. Samuel Brooks stood outside. Alone. Rain soaked his overcoat. When I opened the door, He looked older than he had that afternoon. I hoped you'd open it. I almost didn't. I know. He glanced toward the laptop screen. So you've started. You knew all this? I knew enough. Then why stay silent? He removed his glasses. Because I spent 15 years looking for proof that would survive court. And now, he met my eyes. They've made their first mistake. What mistake? You refused the inheritance. I know. No. His expression hardened. You don't. He reached into his briefcase and placed a thick stack of freshly printed documents onto my table. The trust automatically triggered an internal ownership audit the moment you declined. I frowned. I've never heard of that clause. Neither has the rest of your family. He paused. Because your grandfather wrote it himself. My heartbeat slowed. What does the audit do? Samuel's voice dropped to almost a whisper. It opens every hidden financial record created over the last 20 years. The room fell silent. Then he added the sentence that made every piece suddenly fit together. And if someone has been stealing from the Hartwell family. He looked toward the rain-streaked window. They're about to start destroying each other before anyone ever has to accuse them. The next morning, every major business newspaper carried the same headline. Hartwell heir rejects billion-dollar fortune. My photograph stood beside the article, caught at the exact moment I pushed the inheritance folder away. Some papers called me arrogant. Others called me unstable. None of them knew the truth. I folded the newspaper and placed it beside my untouched coffee. Samuel Brooks sat across from me, quietly reviewing another stack of documents. They're moving faster than I expected. Doing what? He slid a report across the table. Hartwell Holdings issued an emergency board meeting at 6 this morning. I scanned the notice. Agenda. Internal audit suspension. Appointment of temporary financial review committee. Replacement of external legal counsel. I frowned. They're trying to stop the audit. They can't. Samuel removed his glasses. But they can slow it down. Before I could answer, the television hanging in the cafe switched to a live business broadcast. A reporter stood outside Hartwell Tower. Following yesterday's shocking inheritance refusal, investors are questioning whether the Hartwell family is facing an internal power struggle. The camera shifted. My father stepped out of the building surrounded by reporters. Microphones were shoved toward him. Mr. Hartwell, is your son responsible for the company's instability? He didn't hesitate. My son made a personal decision. For one brief second, I thought he would protect me. Then he continued. His emotional condition has been unstable for months. Samuel closed his eyes. I stared silently at the screen. He just called me mentally unstable. He did. And he knows exactly what the media will do. Samuel nodded. They're isolating you. I almost laughed. They're late. I isolated myself yesterday. By noon my access card stopped working. Company email. Deleted. Corporate accounts. Frozen. Even the apartment lease, owned by a Hartwell subsidiary, had received notice of termination. Everything happened with astonishing efficiency. It was almost impressive. Samuel looked over another document. They're cutting every visible connection. So be it. You aren't angry? I considered the question carefully. Yesterday, I would have been furious. Today, only tired. I spent years earning a place they never intended to give me. Samuel studied me for several moments before quietly smiling. Your mother would have been proud. The words hit harder than I expected. That afternoon my phone rang again. Claire. This time, I answered. Adrian. Her voice sounded exhausted. They've been arguing since sunrise. I'm not surprised. No. She hesitated. You don't understand. I remained silent. They're accusing each other. My fingers tightened around the phone. What happened? The audit. Her breathing became uneven. They found missing money. How much? I don't know. But Uncle Victor says someone forged executive approvals. Exactly as Samuel predicted. I glanced toward him. He already understood from my expression. Claire continued. Ethan says you're framing him. I nearly smiled. Interesting. You don't sound surprised. I'm not. Silence. Then she whispered. Did you know? I closed my eyes. I knew something was wrong. Please come back. The request hurt more than every insult from yesterday. Claire, they won't listen to me. I can't fix this. I'm not asking you to. Her voice broke. I'm asking you not to leave me alone. For several painful seconds, I almost agreed. Then my mother's words echoed in my mind. Do not save them. Truth survives longer than loyalty built on lies. I'm sorry. The line went quiet. Finally Claire spoke. I understand. She disconnected. I stared at the silent phone long after the call ended. Samuel said nothing. He didn't need to. That evening, another visitor arrived. Not family. Detective Lena Ortiz. Financial Crimes Division. She placed a business card on the table. You've been difficult to find. I wasn't hiding. No. She smiled slightly. You just stopped answering people. Samuel remained seated. You have a warrant? No. A subpoena? No. Then why are you here? She opened a thin folder. Because 12 years ago someone anonymously reported suspicious international transfers involving Hartwell Holdings. My pulse slowed. The investigation disappeared. It was buried. She looked directly at me. Yesterday it resurfaced. Samuel leaned forward. How? The inheritance audit triggered automatic notifications to federal regulators. Exactly as grandfather intended. Lena slid several printed pages across the table. The same shell companies appear again. I recognized every name from my mother's files. Phoenix Capital, Silver Ridge, Marston Overseas, dozens more. I assume you're not here to arrest me. No. She calmly folded her hands. I'm here because every transfer was approved by someone pretending to be you. The room became perfectly still. What? She pushed forward another document. It was my signature. Perfect. Identical. Except, I'd never signed it. They've been using your authorization credentials for nearly 8 years. Samuel's jaw tightened. I knew they were hiding something. But not this. Lena watched my reaction carefully. You genuinely didn't know. No. She nodded once. I believe that. She closed the folder. Unfortunately, the people inside Hartwell Holdings don't. Night settled over the city like a heavy curtain. Rain tapped softly against the windows while Detective Ortiz spread dozens of documents across my dining table. Forgery after forgery. Transfer after transfer. Each signature looked exactly like mine. Every approval carried my executive identification number. Yet most had been created while I was overseas negotiating contracts, or sitting in board meetings surrounded by witnesses. They built an entire financial network around your identity, Lena said quietly. They needed someone trustworthy. Samuel added. And someone willing to take responsibility. I stared at another document. 8 years. Someone had been stealing through my name while I worked myself nearly to exhaustion protecting the company. The irony almost made me laugh. Lena reached into her briefcase. There's something else. She produced a small evidence bag. Inside was an old security access card. My first executive badge. I lost this years ago. No. She shook her head. It was reported destroyed. My eyes narrowed. It wasn't. It was found yesterday inside a restricted archive room beneath Hartwell Tower. Samuel slowly exhaled. So someone preserved it. Why? Lena answered before he could. Because old security chips contain encryption keys. She looked directly at me. Your digital identity wasn't copied. It was stolen. Across the city, Hartwell Tower no longer resembled the polished empire I had left behind. News helicopters circled overhead. Employees poured out carrying cardboard boxes filled with documents. Television reporters lined the entrance. An emergency tax investigation had begun. None of it happened because I exposed anyone. I had simply stepped away, without someone constantly repairing every crack. The building was collapsing under its own weight. Claire stood alone outside the executive conference room. Through the glass walls, she watched another screaming match. Uncle Victor slammed a financial report across the table. You approved these transfers. I did no such thing. Father shouted back. Ethan's credentials appear everywhere. Ethan's face had turned pale. I've never even seen those companies. Grandmother remained frighteningly calm. Enough. The room immediately fell silent. She looked at each of them. Find Adrian. Ethan blinked. What? Bring him back. Victor frowned. Mother. He handled every audit. He knows every subsidiary. He can stop this. Claire quietly lowered her head. For the first time, she realized something heartbreaking. Nobody missed Adrian. They missed what he did for them. At almost the same moment, my apartment buzzer sounded again. This time it wasn't Samuel, nor Detective Ortiz. It was Daniel Reeves, former chief financial officer. He had resigned 5 years earlier without explanation. His hair had turned almost completely gray. I wasn't sure you'd let me in. I wasn't sure either. He stepped inside carrying a battered cardboard storage box. I've been waiting for this day. My heartbeat quickened. You knew? I suspected. He placed the box on the table. I resigned because I refused to falsify one report. Samuel immediately stood. You never told me. Daniel smiled bitterly. Would anyone have believed me? He opened the box. Inside lay old accounting ledgers, handwritten notes, backup hard drives, original payment authorizations. I kept copies. Samuel carefully examined the first ledger. His expression changed instantly. My God! What? Samuel turned one page toward me. Every forged transfer eventually ended at the same destination. Not Ethan. Not Victor. Not father. A private investment company. Owner. Margaret Hartwell. My grandmother. Nobody spoke. The silence became suffocating. Daniel lowered himself into a chair. I spent years convincing myself there had to be another explanation. There wasn't. My chest felt strangely empty. Not shocked. Not angry. Only sad. The woman who had spent decades preaching honor had quietly drained her own family's empire. Samuel looked devastated. I served her for 33 years. Daniel nodded. So did I. Lena carefully photographed every page. If these originals are authenticated, Samuel finished her sentence. The investigation changes completely. No. Lena corrected him. It becomes criminal. Before anyone could speak again, my phone vibrated. A single message. Unknown number. If you want the truth about your mother's death, come alone. Midnight. Riverside Warehouse, 17. Tell no one. I read it twice. Samuel looked up. What is it? Without answering, I handed him the phone. His face immediately lost all color. He whispered only 4 words. They've finally panicked. The warehouse district was almost deserted at midnight. A cold wind rolled in from the river, carrying the smell of rust, wet concrete, and old machinery. Warehouse 17 stood at the very end of the pier. Most of its windows had been boarded up years ago. Only a faint light leaked through a crack beneath the side entrance. I stopped 20 feet away. Samuel's warning echoed in my mind. If you go, don't expect honesty. People who panic rarely tell the truth. I had ignored his second warning. Don't go alone. I pushed the heavy metal door open. It groaned loudly. Inside, abandoned forklifts cast long shadows across the concrete floor. You're late. The voice came from the darkness. A man stepped into the weak overhead light. Late 50s. Expensive coat. Sharp features. I recognized him immediately. Harold Quinn, former chairman of Phoenix Capital. The same company buried inside my mother's files. He should have been living overseas. Instead, he was standing in front of me. You wanted to talk. I wanted to see if you were as stubborn as your mother. His words landed like a punch. You knew her. Harold smiled without warmth. I knew everyone who mattered. He slowly removed a thick envelope from inside his coat. Your mother asked me to keep these. Why now? Because until yesterday. He looked directly into my eyes. You were still protecting the people who destroyed her. My jaw tightened. What happened to my mother? Harold remained silent for several seconds. Then he asked a question instead. Do you know why your grandfather created that inheritance audit? No. Because he realized someone inside the family had been stealing. I know that. No. His voice hardened. You know someone stole money. What you don't know, he tapped the envelope, is why they needed the money. A long silence stretched between us. They weren't building wealth. They were paying debts. What debts? Harold looked toward the dark river outside. Gambling. I frowned. No, not casino gambling. He turned back. Corporate gambling. He continued quietly. Risky acquisitions. Foreign leverage. Illegal guarantees. Shadow loans. Your grandmother believed Hartwell Holdings could become the largest corporation in the country. And she failed. I stared at him. Instead of admitting failure, she began stealing from the company itself. The words settled heavily inside me. That doesn't explain my mother. Harold slowly nodded. No, it doesn't. He handed me the envelope. Read it. Inside were photocopies, hospital records, insurance claims, private meeting schedules. One document immediately froze my blood. A maintenance report, hospital oxygen supply, inspection date, 3 days before my mother's death. Status, tampered. I looked up sharply. What is this? Harold's face had become expressionless. Your mother's illness was real, but the equipment keeping her alive. He didn't finish. He didn't need to. My hands began trembling. No, I verified it myself. You expect me to believe someone murdered her? I expect you to ask who benefited. The warehouse suddenly felt much colder. Who? Harold answered without hesitation. the person she was about to expose. Before I could speak again, headlights flooded the warehouse entrance. 3 black SUVs. Doors flew open. Men in dark suits poured inside. Harold cursed under his breath. They found us. One of the newcomers shouted. Take the envelope. Harold shoved me backward. Run. The first punch landed against Harold's jaw. Chaos erupted. I instinctively moved to help, then stopped. My mother's words. Do not save them. But Harold wasn't family. Another man swung a metal pipe. Harold staggered. I grabbed a loose wooden pallet and shoved it into the attacker's path. He stumbled. Go, Harold yelled. We sprinted toward the rear exit. Behind us, footsteps thundered across the concrete floor. The warehouse echoed with shouting. Outside, rain had started again. Harold pointed toward a narrow alley. This way. We disappeared between abandoned shipping containers, just as several men burst through the rear door. For nearly 5 minutes we ran without speaking. Only after reaching the opposite side of the docks did Harold finally stop. Breathing heavily, he laughed bitterly. They're desperate now. I looked back toward the distant warehouse. No, they're terrified. At 2 in the morning, Detective Lena Ortiz answered my call on the first ring. I know. You know? We've already received reports. Someone attacked us. I also know who registered the SUVs. Who? She hesitated. They belong to a private security company. And it has only one client. My stomach tightened. Hartwell Holdings. By sunrise, every news station was broadcasting another crisis. Federal investigators enter Hartwell headquarters. Employees stood outside watching agents carry out dozens of sealed evidence boxes. Stock prices plunged another 11% before the market had been open for 30 minutes. I watched the coverage without emotion. A week ago, I would already have been inside the building, coordinating legal teams, calming investors, and preparing emergency statements. Today, I simply watched. The company continued spinning without me. Only now, everyone could hear the grinding gears. Samuel arrived carrying fresh coffee. You didn't sleep. Neither did you. He set 2 folders on the table. The originals from Daniel Reeves have been authenticated. And they're admissible. He paused. So are Harold Quinn's hospital records. I slowly opened one folder. There it was. The maintenance report. Someone had deliberately disconnected the backup oxygen valve in my mother's private hospital room. Not an accident. Not negligence. An intentional act. What happens now? Samuel looked older than ever. Now, he took a deep breath. We prove who ordered it. Before either of us could continue, the television switched to a live press conference. Grandmother stood behind the Hartwell Holdings podium. Perfect posture. Perfect suit. Perfect composure. Reporters shouted questions from every direction. Mrs. Hartwell, did your family steal company funds? Is your grandson responsible? She raised one hand. The room fell silent. I have served this company for 40 years. I will not allow one misguided young man to destroy what generations built. My picture appeared on every screen behind her. She continued. Adrian Hartwell illegally removed confidential materials from company property. Samuel muttered quietly. There it is. I kept watching. She wasn't defending herself. She was constructing another shield. Me. Then came the sentence that changed everything. I have personally requested authorities investigate my grandson's activities. A long silence filled my apartment. Samuel looked at me. How do you feel? I answered honestly. Relieved. He blinked. Relieved? Yes. If she's accusing me publicly. I reached for the remote and lowered the volume. It means she's run out of people inside the family to blame. Samuel slowly smiled. You've learned. I'm learning. A knock interrupted us. This time it wasn't cautious, nor polite. 3 firm knocks. Detective Ortiz entered carrying a sealed evidence case. We found something. She carefully placed it on the dining table. Inside lay an old cassette recorder. I almost threw it away, she admitted. It came from your mother's storage locker. My mother owned a storage locker? No one claimed it after her death. Samuel frowned. Why wasn't it opened before? It required 2 signatures. Whose? Your mother's. And yours. I stared at her. Mine. You were 14. The locker remained sealed because no one had legal authority to replace your signature. She carefully inserted the cassette into a portable player. Static filled the room. Then, my mother's voice. Weak. Breathless. If you're hearing this. She coughed softly. Then someone finally chose truth over comfort. My throat tightened. I don't know whether I'll live long enough to protect you. So I'll leave you something better. The truth. Another pause. I discovered that Margaret Hartwell has been diverting company funds for years. Samuel closed his eyes. She continued. I confronted her. The tape crackled. Then another voice entered. Grandmother's. Cold. Controlled. You should have stayed out of this. Silence. Then my mother's final audible sentence. If anything happens to me, Adrian must never become the shield for your crimes. The recording ended abruptly. No gunshot. No scream. Nothing. Just silence. No one in the room spoke. Detective Ortiz slowly removed the cassette. This recording has already been duplicated. She looked directly at me. We're preparing arrest warrants. My phone vibrated. Claire. I answered. She sounded terrified. Adrian. What happened? They're taking grandmother away. In the background, I heard shouting. Then another voice. Ethan. No. You can't arrest her. Claire whispered through tears. She keeps asking for you. I looked toward the rain outside the window. For years, I would have run there without thinking. Today, I remained exactly where I was. Rain drummed steadily against the courthouse windows. Television vans crowded every entrance. For the first time in decades, the Hartwell name wasn't associated with success. It was associated with fraud. I stood across the street, a paper cup of untouched coffee cooling in my hand. Samuel joined me beneath the awning. You don't have to go inside. I know. They'll ask for you. I know. He studied my face. You still look exhausted. I am. Not because of the investigation. Not because of the media. Because grief had finally caught up with me. For 15 years, I'd mourned a mother I believed illness had taken. Now I had to mourn the possibility that someone had stolen the little time she had left. That wound felt entirely different. Across the street, black SUVs rolled to a stop. Federal officers stepped out. Then they escorted Margaret Hartwell through the courthouse entrance. She walked with the same straight posture she'd carried for 40 years. No panic. No tears. Only control. Cameras flashed relentlessly. Reporters shouted over one another. Mrs. Hartwell, did you embezzle company funds? Did you silence your daughter-in-law? She ignored every question. Until one reporter asked, do you regret losing your grandson? For the first time, she stopped walking. Only for a heartbeat. Then she continued inside without answering. Samuel noticed it too. She heard that one. I know. Inside the courtroom, every seat was filled. Executives, journalists, shareholders, former employees. People who had admired the Hartwell empire for years now watched its foundation crack in public. I chose the last row. Hidden. Unimportant. Exactly where I wanted to be. The prosecutor rose first. For nearly 12 years, company assets were diverted through a network of shell corporations. Screens lit up around the courtroom. Financial charts, transfer records, bank authorizations, every forged signature, every hidden account. One by one, the evidence spoke calmly. It didn't need anger. It didn't need theatrics. Facts were enough. Margaret's attorney stood. The prosecution's theory depends entirely upon circumstantial evidence. The prosecutor smiled faintly. It did. He reached for another folder. Until yesterday, the courtroom quieted. He displayed the cassette transcript. My mother's recorded testimony. Gasps rippled across the gallery. Margaret remained motionless. The prosecutor continued. This recording predates every financial investigation by over 15 years. He turned toward the judge. It establishes prior knowledge. Her attorney objected immediately. We challenge authenticity. We anticipated that. 3 forensic experts took the stand. Voice analysis, tape aging, magnetic degradation. Every test confirmed the same conclusion. Authentic. Margaret finally spoke. Her voice remained calm. My daughter-in-law misunderstood company restructuring. The prosecutor nodded. Then perhaps another witness can clarify. The courtroom doors opened. Daniel Reeves entered, followed by Harold Quinn. Neither man looked toward Margaret. Daniel took the stand first. I resigned because I refused to falsify records. Harold followed. I helped hide evidence because I feared what would happen to my family. The courtroom grew heavier with every sentence. Then Samuel quietly leaned toward me. It's over. I watched my grandmother carefully. No, not yet. Because I knew something she hadn't realized. People like Margaret Hartwell didn't collapse all at once. They unraveled, piece by piece, until there was nothing left to control. During recess, Claire found me outside the courtroom. Her eyes were swollen. You came. I never said I wouldn't. She looked down. I didn't know. I know. I thought. She struggled to continue. I thought everyone depended on grandmother because she was protecting us. I gently shook my head. No. They depended on her because they never learned to stand. Claire wiped her eyes. They're blaming each other now. I expected that. Ethan says father knew. Maybe he did. Father says Uncle Victor planned everything. I looked toward the courthouse doors. It doesn't matter anymore. It matters to them. Yes. But not to me. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Then Claire quietly asked, "Can we still be family?" The question lingered between us. I never stopped being your brother. She burst into tears. For the first time in years. I hugged her without feeling responsible for fixing anything. Sometimes comfort required nothing more than staying. The second week of the trial exposed more than financial crimes. It exposed character. Former executives lined up to testify. Some admitted they had ignored suspicious transactions because promotions kept coming. Others confessed they had suspected wrongdoing but feared losing everything. One after another, people described the same invisible culture. Never question Margaret. Never challenge the family. Never disturb appearances. Listening to them, I realized something painful. The empire hadn't been built only on money. It had been built on silence. Outside the courthouse, Hartwell Holdings continued collapsing. Its stock lost another 30%. International partners withdrew. Banks suspended several major credit facilities. The board of directors resigned almost entirely within 48 hours. The empire that had looked indestructible only weeks ago now survived on emergency financing. No sabotage. No revenge. Only consequences. One afternoon, Detective Ortiz arrived at my apartment carrying another sealed folder. We recovered deleted correspondence. From whom? Your grandfather. Samuel looked up sharply. He destroyed his personal archive before he died. Not all of it. She handed me a single printed email. It had never been sent. Addressed to me. Date. 6 months before his death. I unfolded it carefully. Adrian, if you're reading this, then I failed. I hoped I would have enough courage to tell you everything myself. Instead, I chose peace over truth. That was my greatest mistake. Your mother begged me to expose Margaret. I asked her to wait. I believed I could solve everything quietly. By the time I understood how wrong I was, she was gone. If the family survives, let it survive honestly. If it falls, let it fall honestly. Never become the wall that hides another person's sins. Forgive me, grandfather. I read the final line 3 times, then folded the letter with trembling hands. Samuel quietly asked, "What are you thinking? That he loved us. And he was also a coward." Samuel didn't disagree. Sometimes love failed because courage arrived too late. The verdict came on a gray Thursday morning. The courtroom was silent enough to hear every page the judge turned. Margaret Hartwell stood without assistance. She refused the chair offered to her. The judge spoke for nearly an hour. Fraud, conspiracy, forgery, obstruction, every charge supported by overwhelming evidence. Then came the sentence. Multiple convictions, long-term imprisonment, permanent disqualification from corporate leadership, asset forfeiture. No one applauded. No one celebrated. There was only silence. Margaret finally turned. Not toward the judge. Not toward the cameras. Toward me. Our eyes met across the courtroom. She walked as far as the officers allowed. Adrian. I stepped forward. Not because she demanded it. Because I chose to. For a long moment, she simply looked at me. Then she asked quietly, "When did I lose you?" I answered just as softly. "The day you expected me to carry what belonged to you." Her shoulders sank almost imperceptibly. "I built everything. You built something extraordinary." I nodded once. "And then you buried it beneath your own fear." She closed her eyes. For the first time, she looked old. Not powerful. Not terrifying. Just tired. The officers led her away. She never looked back. Neither did I. Autumn arrived quietly. The city continued moving as though nothing extraordinary had happened. Traffic still crowded the streets every morning. Coffee shops remained full. Office workers hurried beneath glass towers. Only one skyline had changed. The illuminated Hartwell Holdings logo no longer dominated the financial district. The building had been sold. Its new owners removed the family name before sunrise on a rainy Tuesday. I happened to drive past as the final letters came down. H. A. R. T. One by one. I watched without satisfaction. Without bitterness. only with the strange feeling of closing a book I had spent too many years trying to rewrite. Samuel stood beside me. Does it hurt? I thought for a moment. No. Does it feel good? No. What does it feel like? I smiled faintly. Finished. He nodded. That's healthier. Life became surprisingly ordinary. I rented a smaller apartment overlooking a quiet park instead of the business district. No chauffeurs. No assistants. No emergency phone calls after midnight. For the first time since university, I cooked for myself. Badly. One evening I burned rice so completely that the smoke detector forced half the building into the hallway. An elderly neighbor laughed until tears formed in his eyes. You've never held a frying pan before, have you? I laughed too. No. It shows. He introduced himself as Mr. Ellis, a retired history teacher. Within a week, he insisted on teaching me simple meals. I refused to let another human being lose a battle against scrambled eggs. Those evenings became unexpectedly peaceful. No board meetings. No billion-dollar negotiations. Just two people arguing over too much salt. I hadn't realized how deeply I missed normal life. Detective Lena Ortiz visited less often after the trial. When she did, it was usually because another piece of paperwork required my signature. One afternoon, she arrived carrying only a paper bag. No documents today. She placed it on my kitchen table. Fresh pastries. Mr. Ellis immediately appeared from the hallway. You brought food. I've learned priorities, Lena replied. The three of us shared coffee while discussing everything except the Hartwells. Books, travel, music, old detective novels. For nearly 2 hours, nobody mentioned fraud, investigations, or courtrooms. When Lena finally stood to leave, she paused near the door. You know what? I've interviewed hundreds of witnesses. And most people spend years trying to prove they were right. She looked at me thoughtfully. You spent yours trying to become peaceful. I got tired. No. She smiled gently. You grew. After she left, I stood by the window for a long time. Growth rarely felt dramatic. Sometimes it simply meant waking up without dread. Claire called almost every Sunday. Not because she needed rescuing. Because she wanted a relationship. There was a difference. She had accepted a teaching position at a public elementary school. You'll laugh. I probably won't. My students think I'm strict. I smiled. You are. There's 7. So. She laughed for the first time in weeks. I finally understand something. What? We confused control with care. The sentence lingered between us. She wasn't only talking about our grandmother. She was talking about the family we had inherited, and the one we hoped to build differently. Before hanging up, she hesitated. Would you like to have dinner next Friday? As siblings. As siblings. I'd like that. For the first time, we were choosing each other. Not because someone expected it. Because we wanted to. Winter brought another surprise. Samuel Brooks announced his retirement. Officially. I've postponed it 3 times. He placed a small envelope across the cafe table. I think I've earned it. Inside was the deed to a modest lakeside cottage. You bought this 20 years ago. You never mentioned it. I never had time to visit. We both laughed. Now I'll learn whether fish enjoy listening to old lawyers complain. You'll frighten them away. I hope so. He grew quieter. There's one last thing. He handed me another folder. Not legal documents. Architectural drawings. What are these? A community legal center. I looked up. It was your mother's idea. My heartbeat slowed. She wanted free legal services for people who couldn't afford representation. Samuel tapped the blueprint. She asked me to build it someday. You kept this for 15 years. I was waiting for the right partner. I looked at the plans again. Reception. Consultation rooms. Education center. Scholarship office. Not a monument. A beginning. I'll help. I knew you would. Not because I owe anyone. I know. Because it's worth doing. Samuel smiled. Exactly. Construction began in early spring. The building wasn't extravagant. It didn't need marble floors or crystal chandeliers. It needed open doors. Law students volunteered. Retired attorneys offered free consultations. Local businesses donated furniture. People I had never met appeared simply because they believed the project mattered. One afternoon, I found myself standing beneath the unfinished entrance sign. A worker asked, "What should we call it?" I looked toward the bright blue sky. After a long silence, I answered, Emma Hartwell Community Legal Center. My mother's name. Nothing more. Nothing less. The worker nodded. Beautiful. Opening day arrived 6 months later. Families filled the small courtyard. Children played near newly planted trees. Reporters came too, not because of scandal, because hope occasionally made news as well. Claire cut the ribbon. Samuel gave a remarkably short speech for a lawyer. Mr. Ellis somehow managed to criticize the refreshments while asking for a second plate. Lena stood near the back, quietly applauding. When the ceremony ended, a young woman approached me. She held the hand of a frightened little boy. "I heard you help families." "We try." She smiled nervously. "That's enough." As they entered the building, I realized something. For years I had measured success by balance sheets. Profits, market value, corporate rankings. Standing there, watching strangers walk through doors built from truth instead of fear, I finally understood another kind of wealth. One that couldn't be stolen, couldn't be forged, couldn't be hidden offshore. It simply grew every time someone chose compassion over power. That evening, after everyone had gone home, I remained alone in the courtyard. The wind rustled softly through the young trees. Above the entrance, my mother's name reflected the setting sun. Not because she had been perfect, because she had chosen honesty when silence would have been easier. I hoped, wherever she was, she knew I finally understood. 5 years passed without anyone asking me to save the Hartwell family. It was the longest period of peace I had ever known. The Emma Hartwell Community Legal Center had expanded into 3 neighboring cities. Law students who had once volunteered now returned as full-time attorneys. Families found homes instead of losing them. Small business owners defended themselves against predatory contracts. Single parents received legal advice without wondering how to pay for it. Every victory was quiet. No cameras, no headlines, just lives changing one decision at a time. One spring afternoon, I stood in the center's library organizing donated books when my assistant knocked gently on the open door. "Someone is here to see you." "Do they have an appointment?" "No." "Who is it?" She hesitated. "Ethan." For a moment, I simply stared at the shelves. 5 years. Not a single phone call. Not a single letter. "Show him in." A few seconds later, he stepped inside. I almost didn't recognize him. The tailored suits were gone. So was the confidence that had once bordered on arrogance. Gray streaked his hair despite his age. Dark circles rested beneath tired eyes. He looked like a man who had spent years arguing with himself. Neither of us spoke first. Finally, Ethan gave a faint smile. "I practiced this conversation." "Did it help?" "No." He looked around the room. "This place. It's beautiful. It belongs to a lot of people." He nodded slowly. "You really built something." "I didn't build it alone." Silence settled again. Then he reached into his coat and placed a worn leather notebook on my desk. "I found this while cleaning Father's storage unit." I frowned. "My father. He died last winter." The words struck gently rather than violently. I closed my eyes. I didn't know. There wasn't a funeral. Why? He didn't want one. Ethan looked down. "The last few years were difficult." He pushed the notebook toward me. "He wanted you to have this." I opened the cover. Inside, written in my father's familiar handwriting. "For Adrian." My throat tightened. I never had the courage to say these things while I was alive. I kept reading. I spent years believing obedience was loyalty. I obeyed my mother when I should have protected my son. I watched you carry burdens that belonged to us. Every time I remained silent, I asked you to speak for me. I called you unstable because I was afraid. Not of you, of the truth. The pages blurred slightly. I don't ask forgiveness. I only hope you never become the father I was. I gently closed the notebook. The room remained completely silent. Ethan finally spoke. He regretted everything. I believe him. You do? Regret came too late. I looked toward the window, but it was real. Ethan nodded slowly. "I thought you'd hate us forever." "I don't." He looked genuinely confused. "Why?" "Because hatred keeps people connected. And I finally learned how to let go." His shoulders relaxed for the first time since entering. "I think." He laughed quietly. "I came here expecting punishment. You've already lived through yours." He lowered his eyes. "Yes, I have." When he left, he paused at the doorway. "Claire's expecting you tonight." "I'll be there." He smiled. "She'll be happy. So will I." That evening, our dinner table looked nothing like the grand banquets of the old Hartwell mansion. There were no servants, no crystal chandeliers, no carefully rehearsed conversations. Mr. Ellis argued that homemade bread was always superior. Samuel insisted fish were impossible to negotiate with. Lena rolled her eyes. Claire laughed so hard she nearly spilled her tea. Children from neighboring apartments chased one another through the small garden. Someone burned dessert. Nobody cared. For the first time in my life, families sounded like laughter instead of obligation. Early summer arrived with warm sunlight and flowering trees. The legal center held its annual scholarship ceremony. Dozens of young students filled the auditorium. Some came from families who had once been clients. Others had grown up believing a legal education was impossible. Now they stood proudly on stage. Before the ceremony began, Samuel leaned toward me. One speech. I knew you were going to say that. It won't kill you. It might. It definitely won't. The audience laughed as I walked toward the podium. Public speaking had never frightened me. Speaking honestly had. I looked across the room. Claire smiled encouragingly. Lena folded her arms with quiet confidence. Mr. Ellis gave me a dramatic thumbs up. Samuel looked almost annoyingly pleased. I took a slow breath. When I was younger, the room became silent. I believed strength meant carrying everything alone. It doesn't. I believed protecting people meant hiding the truth. It doesn't. I believed love required endless sacrifice. A few students exchanged thoughtful glances. It doesn't. I paused. The hardest lesson of my life was learning that honesty sometimes breaks families before it heals them. But lies break them forever. The auditorium remained completely still. I once walked away from unimaginable wealth. People thought I had thrown my future away. I smiled faintly. They were right. I threw away a future built on fear, so I could build another one based on trust. Applause slowly filled the room. Not loud, not dramatic, warm, genuine. When the ceremony ended, the scholarship recipients gathered for photographs. One young man approached me afterward. I've wanted to ask you something. What is it? If you could go back. He hesitated. Would you accept the inheritance this time? I looked out through the glass wall toward the courtyard. Children were planting a small oak tree beside the entrance. Its roots disappeared quietly into the earth. I smiled. No, not because wealth is wrong, but because some fortunes cost more than they're worth. He nodded thoughtfully. I think I understand. I hope you never have to. That evening I visited the cemetery alone. The sky glowed gold beneath the setting sun. I carried no flowers. Only 2 letters. One from my mother, one from my father. I placed both beneath the shared memorial stone. The breeze moved gently through the surrounding trees. For a long time, I said nothing. Then, quietly, I stopped trying to save everyone. I think that's what finally saved me. The wind answered with soft, rustling leaves. It sounded almost like forgiveness. I turned and walked toward the cemetery gate without looking back. Not because I wanted to forget, but because I no longer needed to carry the past with me. Behind me rested the family I had inherited. Ahead of me waited the family I had chosen. And for the first time in my life, I walked forward with empty hands, which meant they were finally free to build something worth holding.